Produced from the Cube Studios, this is Strong by Science. In-depth conversations about science-based training, sports performance, and all things health and wellness. Here's your host, Max Schmarzo.
Ed, thank you for being on today. Very, very excited about what we have going on. For those of you not familiar with Ed Cara, and I'm going to say his name incorrectly. Cara, is that correct, Ed?
Cara is right. Very good. Yes, thank you.
Awesome. I've practiced that about 19 times the other night, and I kept feeling like I was getting it wrong. Ed is one of the more well-rounded individuals I've come across. His work is awesome. I initially learned quite a bit about him from Chase Phelps, who we had on earlier, and that came through more from blood flow restriction training. But I've had the pleasure of reading up on Ed quite a bit, and his background is more than unique. Well-rounded is an understatement. I'm really excited to have him on. I call him one of the most unique individuals people need to know about, especially in the sports science world. He really encompasses quite a bit of just about every domain you can think about. So Ed, thank you for being on here. And if you don't mind giving a little bit of background and a bio about yourself.
Thanks so much. Not to bore anybody really, but I kind of started as a frontline medic in the Army. Really, the emphasis back then was, hey, get people back to action as soon as possible. So that was my mindset. Spent about 8 years in an emergency department, learning and training through them. My undergrad degree is in exercise physiology from University of California, Davis. I love exercise science. I love exercise physiology. Started doing athletic training because my junior year in college, I was a Division I wrestler, tore my ACL, PCL, and LCL. My strength coach, chiropractor, athletic trainer, all the above, helped me get back wrestling within 4 months with a brace at a pretty high level, Division I level. And I was like, wow, I don't want to go to med school. What I want to do is help other people recover from injury and get back to the activities that they love. And so I was kind of investigating, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I really wanted to be an athletic trainer, but didn't realize how much or how little money they make. And so I was kind of investigating some other things, checked out physical therapy, dentistry, but I really wanted to be in the locker room. I wanted to have my own practice. I wanted to be able to do what I wanted to do and not sit on protocols and things like that, because I don't think that they exist. And so I chose chiropractic school. I went to chiropractic school, learned my manual therapy, my manual techniques, diagnosis, loved it, was able to get patients off the street, didn't have to live and die by insurance and referrals, was able to open my own clinic. And about 4 years in, I realized that I didn't really know very much. I knew how to adjust people. I knew how to do a little bit of soft tissue, but not really. We weren't taught that. I felt like my exercise background had really dropped off because I wasn't doing a lot of strength and conditioning anymore. And so I went back and got a PhD in sports medicine and athletic training. I had a really big goal of publishing and trying to contribute to the literature, but also understanding the literature and how it applies to the clinical science and clinical practice, and try to bridge the gap really between science and in the clinic. I love treating patients. I do it every single day. A lot of people think I don't because I write so much education, but like I'm still in my clinic right now, 12 hours a day the last 3 days, because it's what I love to do. And then just for kicks and giggles, I went out and got an MBA too. So I've worked in a lot of different environments, VA, medical system, 24-hour fitness corporate. I've consulted for a lot of companies like Rock Tape. I was their medical director. Fismodo, Trigger Point Performance. I've done some research for Theragun. I've kind of been able to do a lot with the PhD, which I love. But really my home base is in the clinic, in the trenches, helping people get better and back to activity.
That's awesome. Yeah. Coming from an athletic training background, an athlete. So I myself played small Division III basketball, and I'm a certified athletic trainer as well. And it's the initial love you kind of fall into being in that realm, and that's who you typically work with. And then realizing that maybe the hours and the practice that they do isn't fit for you, and finding ways you can really get a little more hands-on work. I took the sports scientist route. It sounds like your route has been just about everything and all the above. So it's great to hear that, because having that well-rounded profile where you were an athlete and now you've been in the medical side, you've been in the strength conditioning side, and even the business development side. You really see all domains from different angles. Now, Ed, I know you are the educational director for Smart Tools with their blood flow restriction training. Chase has
Yeah.
spoken very highly about your protocols. I've listened to some of them. If you don't mind diving into a little bit, what exactly is blood flow restriction training and what are the potential benefits of it?
Yeah, it was about 2014. I got approached by Smart Tools. They had developed the only FDA listed, or at that point, FDA approved instrument assisted soft tissue mobilization tools. Other people like to call it, basically Graston or whatever. And I was really intrigued with what their philosophy was, which was, hey, we want to make things in the US. We want to create jobs in the US. And we want to create the highest quality product that also is affordable for the small clinic. Whereas before the options were, hey, $3,000 here, $2,000 here. And so I wrote education for Smart Tools because of that. And because I just believed so much in keeping things here in the US and providing jobs and things locally. So that's really where this all started. And then in about 2015, my buddy Skylar Richards up at FC Dallas, he has of the MLS, he has the lowest lost game days in the MLS. And
Wow.
when you think about that and how hard that is, it's such a long season. It's such a grind. It's the longest season in professional sports. You think, wow, what is he doing there? I mean, I really respect his work up there. And so we were working on a project together and how I was fortunate enough to meet him and just really got to pick his brain on a lot of stuff and things I was doing in the clinic and what could I be doing better. And one day he just goes, have you seen this BFR stuff? And I'm like, no, I have no idea. I had zero idea about it. And so as usual, the science geek that I am, I went to PubMed, Sports Discus, and I was like, holy crap, man. I can't even understand how many articles are out there regarding this already. And this is back, 2015, 2016. I was so used to, going and looking up kinesiology tape research and it being, really bad. And you got to kind of apply a lot of these products to research that's really not that strong. This was not the case. And so I brought it to Nick, the CEO of Smart Tools, and I'm like, dude, we've really got to look at this because really there's only one option. And I saw the parallels between what was happening with instrument assisted, where there wasn't very many options, but they were very, very expensive. And what we could do now with another thing that I thought was amazing. And it wasn't a passive modality, which is I was super excited about because, I had to become a corrective exercise specialist because I knew I didn't have enough time with people to cause true strength and hypertrophy. But BFR allows me to do that. And so that's really where I kind of switched my mind and went, wow, I really need to start investigating this. And so to answer your question, BFR is the brief and intermittent occlusion of arterial and venous blood flow using a tourniquet while exercising at low intensities or even at rest. And so what that means is we basically use a medical grade tourniquet and restrict the amount of oxygen or blood flow into a limb while it's exercising and totally occluding venous return back to the heart. And what this does is, the way that I explain this to my patients is it essentially tricks your brain into thinking you're doing high intensity exercise, but you're not. And you're protecting tissue and you don't cause any muscle damage that you normally would with high intensity exercise or even low intensity exercise to failure. And so it works perfectly for those people that we can't compromise tissue, like for me in a rehab setting.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a super interesting area, and it's something that I have dove into not nearly as much as you have. But you can see the benefits really stemming back from its origins, right? When it was Katsu training in Japan made for older adults who couldn't really exercise and needed to find a way to induce hypertrophy, now being used to help expedite the healing process, being used in season after a difficult game to improve healing, or whether or not it's used to actually substitute a workout when travel becomes too demanding to actually load the system. Now with BFR, are you getting in regards to hypertrophy similar adaptations hypertrophy wise if you were to do BFR with a low load, say 20% of your 1 rep max, compared to something moderately heavier?
Yeah, or exceeds. And the time frame, true hypertrophy takes, according to the literature, depending on what reference you're looking at the minimum 12 weeks, but more likely 16 weeks. And you've got to train at least 65%, or you've got to take low intensity loads defined as 20 to 35% of 1 rep max, all the way to failure, which we know causes damage to the tissue. BFR starts to show hypertrophy changes at week 2. So
Wow.
my best my so I this it's kind of embarrassing, but it is what it is. But like, I started learning about this BFR stuff. I'm an early adopter, right? So I go right away and I go buy the first product I can. I have zero idea what I'm doing, dude. Zero. Like, and a former Mr. America and Mr. Olympia, former Mr. America champion, and one of the youngest Mr. Olympias or Mr. Olympia to ever compete. He competed. He didn't stand, but anyway, so high level bodybuilder. Okay, whatever he was, but he was definitely a Mr. America. He comes into my clinic when I was in Denver. I was probably a neighbor of you at the time, and he's like, okay, I've got this pain in my tricep. It's been there for 6 months. I haven't been able to lift as heavy. My my arm isn't as big. It's driving me crazy, right? He's a bodybuilder. Of course, it's driving him crazy. So I measure it. He's a half an inch difference on his involved side versus uninvolved side. I diagnose him with tricep tendonitis. I have zero idea what I'm doing with BFR, but I said, listen, I want you to use these cuffs. I got to go to Europe. I got to go lecture in Europe for a couple of weeks. And I want you to 3 times a week, I want you to do 3 exercise. I like to use the TRX suspension trainer. I've done a lot of work with them and I really respect their product and I love it for rehab. So I said, listen, I want you to do 3 exercises on the suspension trainer. I want you to do a tricep, I want you to do a bicep, and I want you to do some, compound exercise. And in that case, I gave him a low row. I come back in 2 weeks, he comes back in the clinic. I remeasure. His involved side was a 1/4 inch larger than his uninvolved side. And he's like, dude, that's 2 weeks. I'm like, dude, that's 2 weeks. And he's like, this is crazy. And I go, yeah, I agree. And since then, I've been like bought in. Like, it's for a hypertrophy, it is unbelievable. You get people that come in that have had, like after my injury in college wrestling, my ACL, I've torn it 3 times now. My quad atrophy was bad. My calf was not the same size. Literally, symmetry occurs so quickly when you start applying these principles. It just blows you away.
So when you're using it, are you using it more in an isolated manner, or are you doing more compound exercises? For example, if you're doing the ACL, are you typically assuming they're back to full function ish? Are you doing body weight squats, or is that starting off with knee extensions? How do you kind of progress that program?
Yeah, it really just depends on where they're at. Like, with ACLs, you can pretty much start if there's no contraindications. You can start day one, um, right after surgery, to try to prevent as much of that quad wasting that we get from reperfusion injury and reactive oxygen species and all the other things that occur. So literally day one, you can start, and you'll start isolated. You might start with an isometric. I really do like to do isometrics early on in my rehab. Um, and you can use the cuffs, and you can fatigue out all the motor units. If they're not quite there yet, like let's say pre-surgically where they can't use the limb, they're either bedridden or they're in a brace or they're a cast, you can use it with electric stim or a Russian stim. And with that contraction, not only do you drive growth hormone, but you can also prevent atrophy by up to 90 to 95%. So you can start early on. And I like to call it like phases of injury, right? Like pre-surgical or pre-injury, right at injury. You kind of get into the subacute phase of inflammation. You kind of progress to isolated exercises. Then you go into isolated and compound. Then you go into compound. You kind of move through the gamut. What's so cool about BFR is you're not having to reinvent the wheel. Like, you use the same protocols you've been using. I mean, really. I mean, if you're using lightweight with TheraBand or resistance tubing, which I do every day, add BFR on it. Now, instead of your brain thinking you're not doing anything, your brain's like, whoa, high intensity exercise. Let's help this tissue recover because it's got to get injured. So we're going to grow.
That's pretty amazing. I've used it myself. I do have my smart tools set. I'm biased. I like what you guys are doing. I really like the fact that there's no cords and it's quite mobile. It allows us to do sled pushes, resisted marches, whole wide span of movements. And before we're kind of hopped on air here, you're talking about some of the nutritional interventions you add to that, whether it be vitamin C, uh, collagen, glucosamine. What specifically are you putting together, and why are you doing that? Is that for tissue healing?
Yeah, that's right. It's we have in my clinic. We're a multidisciplinary clinic in Dallas, Texas, and called the Body Lounge as a shameless plug. But we really believe that healing has to start from the inside. That it has to start with the micronutrients and then the macronutrients, and then pretty much everything can be prevented and healed with nutrition and exercise. That's what we truly believe, and that's what we try to help people with. The only thing that I use manual therapy for, and I do a lot of needling and all these other things, is to help people get it down, their pain down enough so that they can do more movement. And so, from a micronutrient standpoint, we've got to hit the things that are going to help with collagen synthesis and protein synthesis. So, that would be protein supplementation, that would be vitamin C. Um, we do lots of hydration because most of us are walking around dehydrated. If you look at some of the studies looking at, even with a normal diet, magnesium is deficient, vitamin C is deficient. During the winter, all of us are vitamin D deficient. Glutathione production starts to basically go to nil. So all those things we will supplement either through IM injection, intramuscular injection, or through IV.
And do you guys take oral supplements on that too for some of the glutathione or the vitamin D aspects? Are you taking precursors? So is it NAC? Or are you guys taking glutathione?
We inject glutathione either
Okay.
in your IV or in the IM. With the literature supporting that you only absorb about 5 to 10% of whatever oral supplementation you take. We try to push it IM or IV. And then in between sessions, yes, they will take oral to try to maintain their levels. We do lab testing prior, lab testing after to make sure we're getting the absorption rate. But a lot of our people, we already know they don't absorb B12 vitamin, and so we've got to do it injectable.
Gotcha. Makes sense. With the BFR itself, and I want to get a couple of questions knocked out before I go too far off topic. I'm
Sure.
curious about some of the cellular swelling protocols and what that specifically is, what's happening physiologically, and how you implement that.
Yeah, so cell swell protocol, or what we like to call a 5x5 protocol. We use the tourniquets in the upper extremity at 50% limb occlusion pressure, at 80% limb occlusion pressure in the lower extremity. You keep them on for 5 minutes, and then you rest for 3 minutes, meaning I deflate the cuffs but don't take them off. And then I reinflate at the same pressure for 5 minutes and then deflate for 3 minutes. So you're 5 on, 3 off for 5 rounds, thus the 5x5 protocol. What's happening is that you're basically you're creating this swelling effect, because remember there's no venous return, so nothing is, but you're getting this small trickle in of fluid or blood into that limb. And so what happens is the extracellular swelling occurs. Our body is just dying for homeostasis. The pressures increase, and there's also an osmotic change, and the fluid gets pushed extracellularly into the muscle cell. The body starts to think that you're going to break those muscle cells. Think of it as like as a water balloon, is a great analogy that I've heard. So the water balloon is starting to swell. That muscle cell starts to swell. Well, your body thinks, your brain thinks that those cells need to protect themselves, or otherwise they're going to break and cause apoptosis or die. And so the response is this whole cascade of the mTOR C1, which is basically a pathway for protein synthesis. And that's why they think that you can maintain the muscle size in an inactive muscle through the cell swell protocol. And then when we do the cell swell protocol, I also like to add either isometrics if I can, or if they're in a cast, I'll add electric stim. I like to use the power dot, that's my favorite, or a Russian stim unit. And then you can make the settings so that you're getting muscular contraction with that, it appears to drive growth hormone, and it drives it about 1.5 times high intensity exercise and up to 3 times more so than baseline. When we have a growth hormone spurt like that, and we have enough vitamin C, it allows for collagen synthesis. I like to call that a pool of healing. So whether you can or cannot exercise that limb that's injured, if I can create that pool of healing systemically, now I've got an environment that can heal. So I have zero excuse as a provider not to get people doing something to become, um, healing faster, basically.
And are you typically putting that at the end if they were training, or is that typically beginning? Where in that session are you putting that, assuming that that is done in conjunction with other movements or exercises?
Yeah, so like let's say I have a cast on your right leg. You've got a fracture. I failed to mention also that it appears that BFR also helps with bone healing. There's been a couple studies. Um, so if we get this increased bone healing and I can't use that limb, then I'm going to use the other limbs and I'm going to use your cardiovascular function. Um, I'm going to use, let's say with that leg, I'll do upper body ergometer with the cuffs on in order to train their cardiovascular system. So that way we maintain aerobic capacity while they're healing for that leg. I will do crossover exercises. So I'll hit that opposite leg because something happens when I use the cuffs on my left leg, I get a neurological response on my right leg, and I maintain strength and I reduce the amount of atrophy that occurs. And it's all neurological. So if I had an hour with somebody and I was trying to do the cell swell protocol, I would probably do it first to make sure, because it's a 40-minute protocol. It is a long protocol. If you add up 5 minutes on, 3 minutes off. Now, during the 3 minutes off, I can do soft tissue work. I can do other things to help that person, or I can just have them in the athletic training room on a table and they can learn to inflate and deflate on their own. It's not has to be supervised the whole time. And that's usually what they do in my office is I'll put them in the IV lounge and I'll just teach them how to inflate, deflate, and they just keep time.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then
Go ahead. I don't mean to interrupt. My fault.
No, it's okay. And then I just hit other areas. So if I do have extra time, then I might do, an upper body push, an upper body pull. I might do, whatever I can with whatever time I have. If you don't have that much time, then you do the best you can. But with the cell swell protocol, a new study just came out that if you only do 2 rounds of that, you don't get the protein synthesis measured through mTOR-C1. So a lot of times people ask me, well, can I just do this twice? And according to the literature, it looks like no. It looks like you have to take it to 5 because you got to get enough swelling to make the brain think that you're going to explode those muscle cells.
Wow. So let me I'm take a step back and try to process the majority of that. So essentially what you're doing with the cellular swelling protocol is that you're initiating protein synthesis by basically tricking the body that those cells themselves are going to break down. And then when you add the EMS, so the electrical muscular stimulation, you're getting the growth hormone response that you otherwise wouldn't. Is that correct?
That's correct. So,
All right, and go ahead.
So imagine after a game, I'm Skylar Richards. I just got done with my team. We're on the bus or we're on the airplane. My guys have just finished a match. Your forwards have run 7 miles at high intensity sprint. You think we have any muscle breakdown? Probably have a little bit of damage. They got to play again in a few days, and I want to do things to help their recovery. So now I put them on with E-stim. They're not doing any exercise. They're just chilling. They're just hanging out. But we're getting protein synthesis. We're getting growth hormone production. I give them some vitamin C supplementation. I give them some protein supplementation. And now not only do we have protein synthesis, but we also have growth hormone and collagen formation in the presence of vitamin C. So that's where we kind of get into the recovery, which Chase is doing a lot of work with.
And how much vitamin C are you supplementing with?
It really depends. I try to stick to right around, in a new patient, I'll start off at 3,000 and I'll go to 5,000 milligrams. It will cause a little dirty pants, if I can quote some of my mentors. So I try to start them light and then I'll move them up. I'll go as high as 10,000 if I need it, but I typically stay in the 3,000 to 5,000 range.
And are you having collagen with that as well?
I personally don't, but I think it would be a good idea if you did.
With some of that, I guess I really like the idea of using the BFR on the opposite leg that's injured to increase cortical drive. So for listeners who aren't familiar, when you're training one limb, you get a neurological phenomenon that occurs to increase performance in the other limb. And so what Ed's referring to, if you had one limb that was immobilized and couldn't function, if you use BFR on the other limb, you're able to stimulate some of those higher type 2 motor units, and you're able to have a cortical drive that's near maximal intent, which is going to help then increase the performance of the other leg. Now, you also say that is promoting this positive adaptation environment, this kind of hormonal milieu, like per se. How long does that last for, the presence of growth hormone?
I mean, it looks like that the stimulation lasts somewhere between 48 and 72 hours. And so I think that that's why when they've done studies looking at doing BFR for strength and hypertrophy, 5 days a week compared to 2 to 3 days a week, the 2 to 3 days a week are just essentially equal to the 5 days a week. So I think it's long enough that if you do it like twice a week, that you're going to get enough crossover.
Gotcha. And you're using it too for the analgesic effect. So when you're using BFR, you have that temporary time period or time window where a knee that might be bothering you doesn't irritate as much. And are you using that window then to train other exercises and movements while they have I guess, a pain-free motion?
Yeah, absolutely. So and I really can't explain it. We know from the science that it doesn't matter what type of exercise that you do, there is an analgesic effect. And that's why I emphasize so much with providers, especially manual therapists that tend to think, hey, my hands or my needles or my laser or my ultrasound or e-stim or whatever it is the healing driver. It's not the healing driver. Exercise is a healing driver. And I know that's my opinion and people will argue with me, but it's true. My hands are not nearly as important as getting people moving because of the analgesic effect and just overall health effects. With that said, BFR has some sort of analgesic effect that I can't explain. Now, of course, we all know it's in the brain. There's something that goes on where you're able to reduce the pain level for up to 45 minutes, and then I can train in that window. There is an overall ability to improve people's movement even longer than that, too. What I find is that once I get people moving, their tendency, just like inertia, once you get it moving, it keeps moving. Same thing with the people that I work with. They tend to get moving more in my clinic. They get confidence, then they end up moving more and more and more, and they get away from, being scared.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it because you do have that hesitation to move. And when you're providing a stimulus that might ease some of the pain momentarily, I know there's some research out there looking at tendinopathy, the tendinopathy being like knee pain, essentially, in the layman's term kind of way to put it. And they're doing it with like a metronome in the background going ping, ping, ping. And they're having that external stimulus that they focus on to help disassociate the brain and the knee and the pain. And this is something I kind of talked with about Chase and how he says, yeah, we've been using, like you alluded to, the BFR to remove the presence of pain so they can do some of these exercises that they typically associate with pain in a pain-free way.
Yeah, and then now that they're exercising, now you get the additional analgesic effect of the exercise itself. So it's kind of like a double wang.
Gotcha. Yeah. With blood flow restriction training, because it does promote such an environment that really has an intense uh, stimulus to the body, where you get these type 2 fibers stimulated, high levels of lactate, high levels of metabolite accumulation. I sent you a paper about the possible use of blood flow restriction training on cognitive performance. I was curious if you had a chance to kind of dive into some of that. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts, being that you have such a holistic view of everything.
Yeah, definitely. I think I did get a chance to look at it, and I appreciate you sending that to me because I have to lecture in May on reaction times, and I was trying to figure out how am I going to include BFR in this lecture at some point and not be totally inauthentic. But now I can, so I totally appreciate it. I know that there's an additional benefit. I've seen it. I've worked with stroke patients, other types of people that have autoimmune disease, different types of conditions where I've used BFR and their functional capacity improves over what their physical capacity is doing. And so I am not surprised at what I'm seeing with that, and I've got to learn more about what other people are thinking. It was interesting what you sent me regarding the insulin growth factor one. We know that that's driven up much higher with BFR compared to low intensity exercise, and the relationship between that and cognitive function. So I've got to dive deeper into it. I'm definitely not a neuroscientist. I'm like a pretty much glorified PE teacher, and just trying to get people moving. And I've got to understand that more because there is a large association between that exercise component and future health, not just of muscle, but also of brain.
Yeah, one of the things that I do work with a neurosurgeon, and he's awesome. Dr. Chad Pressmack is extremely intelligent, and he saw the blood flow restriction training as one of those means to improve cognitive performance. And I ended up finding the paper after he had talked about it. One of the things that interested me was the fact that it is this huge stressor, especially in a very controlled way. Typically, if you're going to get that level of demand on the body, you need to do something very intense. So do something that is almost um, stressfully controlled, and then allowing yourself to maybe do some sort of dual processing task, whether it's reaction time and reading, if you're using a Dynavision board, whether it's you have a laser on your head and you have to walk in a straight line while keeping that laser or dot on a specific screen. I'm excited to see how BFR can be carried over to some of these other domains, whether it is motor learning or re-education of movement, or vestibular therapy. I think it just has a very unique place to really stress the body physiologically without needing to do something that requires lots of equipment or having someone run up and down with, say, a heavy sled. I'd be curious to hear some of your thoughts on. I know you haven't had a huge opportunity to dive into it, but if I had to hand you the keys to say, hey, what do you see in the future for BFR in regards to not just the cognitive standpoints, but ways you can use BFR outside of a physical training area? What kind of specific domains do you see it being utilized in?
Well, definitely recovery. I love the fact of driving growth hormone and supplementing correctly and letting people heal faster naturally. Um, I think the ischemic preconditioning protocol is very underutilized and very not known very well. And the ischemic preconditioning is when we use 100% occlusion, either the upper extremity or the lower extremity. We keep it on for 5 minutes and we do 2 rounds with a 3-minute rest in between. And I've used this to decrease pain in an athlete prior to going out and playing like a high level sport, or doing plyometrics or doing other things where they're going to get muscle damage to that high intensity exercise. So you get the analgesic effect around an injured tissue. But the really unique thing about the ischemic preconditioning is that it has been shown to reduce the amount of muscle damage that occurs due to the exercise. That's why they call it preconditioning. So we can utilize it prior to a game. We can use it prior to a plyometric session. We can use it prior to a high intensity lifting session and reduce the amount of damage that occurs to the tissue, so we don't have such a long recovery time and we can continue to train at high levels. I think that is probably the most exciting thing that I've seen, absent of the cognitive possibilities. The other thing that I'll utilize it on is I like to use witty sum lights to do some reaction time and do some memory training and things. And I love to torture my people and get them nice and tired. I think what's going to come around is all these mechanisms. They are what they are. But the true mechanism that I'm seeing is that fatigue is the primary factor. If I can fatigue you centrally and I can fatigue you peripherally in the muscle, that's where the adaptation occurs. So although right now, we always are on these, we have to use this specific sets and reps and weights and all these other things. So true for the research, because we need to make it as homogeneous as we can. But in clinic, if you're a patient that comes to me with a rotator cuff tear, I don't know what your 1 rep max is for your external rotation. I've got to guess. And so if I don't do exactly the right amount of weight, does that mean I'm not getting the benefit? Well, I'm telling you anecdotally, that's not true. I just know that I have to take you to fatigue. And so if I'm off by a couple of reps, no big deal. I'm just not going to take you to failure, so I don't get the injury to the tissue that you normally would occur with lightweight to failure. And I'm going to get that fatigue factor. And I'm going to get you to adapt, and I'm going to get you bigger and stronger today than you were yesterday. And that's the goal.
Yeah, that's That's a great way to put it because you're looking at, again, mechanisms and why things are occurring versus, being stuck to the literature of I have to use 20%. It's like, how do we find a way to fatigue this system? And BFR being a component of that. Now, outside of blood flow restriction training, with your practice, it is quite holistic. Are there any specific areas that you see that I don't want to, other therapists, other holistic environments could learn from outside of blood flow restriction training? What areas could they really? What advice, I should say, put it that way, would you give someone who's trying to put together a holistic program to dive into outside of, say, BFR? Is there any specific devices, specific modalities, specific means of nutrition for that?
I mean, if I was to try to put us, what we're trying to do, um, I would say that it's all about capacity versus demand. I want to try to maximize the capacity of the individual or the organism to exceed the demands that you're trying to apply to it. If we can do that, we'll keep you injury free and we'll keep you performing. If I allow those demands to exceed your capacity, you're going to get injured. And so, what can I do to maximize your capacity through nutrition, through exercise, through rest, through meditation, through prayer, through whatever that is, through sleep? I think that that's really looking at the person as a whole. And if I can keep thinking about what are the demands that I'm applying to whatever tissue that is, and I can keep those demands just slightly below and try to increase that capacity, I'm going to get people better. And really, that's all I think about. Can that disc take, how much pressure can that take? And what direction can I take it? Well, I'm going to work it that direction until we can do a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And I try to really make it simple for myself versus reliant on a modality or anything else in that matter. Really, it's really just thinking about how much can they how much can they tolerate, and I'm going to put restrictions on you so that way you don't exceed that capacity, so that way that tissue can heal. And if it can't, then maybe that's a referral to some of the surgeons or non-surgical physicians that I work with because they maybe fail my treatment. Um, but most people can improve their capacity. We've seen 85-year-olds, and not just me, I'm saying in the literature, improve their strength through resistance training. 85. The body will always adapt. We are not weak beings. We're not fragile. We can be stressed, and we need to be stressed. And we need to be stressed until the day that you put me in the grave. Otherwise, we will get sarcopenia and we will degrade and our brain will become mush. And I just don't want to go that way. And I want to help as many people that have the same philosophy, whether I'm doing it one-on-one with somebody or I'm teaching others. I want them to have the same philosophy too.
Oh, that makes total sense. I love the idea of we need to continually stress ourselves because I do feel like as we age, we have the, I guess, myth or belief that we can't do more, but we can't do more because we stopped doing more, not because we can't. I've worked with an individual who had a hip replacement at 96 years old, and he came back and 4 months later was working out again. And that alone was enough evidence for me to realize that it's not necessarily about, oh, as I get older, I have to be this. And we kind of have that thought process that as we age, we do less, so we start to do less. But finding ways to stress the system in a way that it can handle it, right? It's the idea of what is the capacity, like you said, and what is their ability to adapt. Now, are there any specific ways that you assess an individual's capacity to handle a load? Is that a lot of subjective understanding who they are, or are there any other metrics you're using, whether it be sleep tracking, HRV, or anything in that domain?
I have not really done a lot of that. It's more about what they tell me they want to do. You want to come in and you want to lift your grandkid. Well, that's that's our marker. You want to come in and you want to do the CrossFit Open. Okay, well that's your marker. You want to come in, and you want to run a marathon. That's your marker. We can always find markers either of activities of daily living, or they could be something out there that's a goal. I've never run a half marathon, and I want to do that. So those are really the markers that I use. I haven't gotten into a lot of the other things. My environment, I mean, I would love to have a whole performance center and a research lab and all that stuff, and then maybe someday. But with what I have and what I work with, it's more about just what the person wants to do and what is something fun for them to do to keep them active and healthy, and that really becomes the marker. And if it's not enough, somebody I had a ER physician come in and goes, well, I come out, I walk, 20 or 30 minutes, and then I walk, at work all day, and I'm like, dude, it's not enough. And I sent him some articles looking at physiological adaptation to walking, and he's like, yeah, you're right, it's not enough. And I'm like, we are a minimalist. We're like, okay, well, this is the vitamin C you need in order to be healthy. No, the recommendations are so you don't get scurvy. There's a big difference between, fending off disease versus optimal health. I'm out for optimal health. So let's stress the system to the point where we're not injuring ourselves, but we are pushing ourselves, because I think there's such a huge physiological but also psychological benefit to that.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. We're fending off disease, right? Our healthcare system is not very proactive. You have to have something go wrong for your insurance to take care of it. It's very backwards, and it's unfortunate. And we would like to be able to get to a place where let's not look at micronutrients and what we're putting in our body as a means to, like you said, avoid getting scurvy. But let's look at it from a way to actually function and function relative to our own capacity and our own goals. With that, are you doing blood work? I'm assuming of some sort, maybe.
Yeah, we do labs to look at a variety of different things. We don't currently do hormonal therapy. We've got some partners in town that do that. We decided we wanted to stay in our lane and really kind of stick to what we do. And so we refer out any hormonal deficiencies, whether you need some testosterone or growth hormone or some other things, estrogen, progesterone, whatever. So we're not doing that currently, and we don't see ourselves doing that because we have some great partners that do a much better job than we would ever do. So I'm also a big believer in stay in your lane, refer out, make friends, do whatever is best for the patient or the client, um, because that pays way more dividends for them than trying to do everything, all in house, unless you have it already in house, but as a specialty.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Find a way to facilitate and where you can excel. Um, and I know you got a little bit of a time crunch here. We got to be wrapping it up here. For people listening, where can we find more out about yourself? Where can we listen to you? What social medias are you on, and what are those handles?
So Instagram, I'm under just my name, Ed LeCara, EDLECARA. Facebook, same thing, just Ed LeCara. Twitter, Ed LeCara. Everything's just under Ed LeCara, really. Every Tuesday, I do a BFR. I call it BFR Tuesday. I do kind of a lunch and learn, 15, 20 minutes on either a research article or a protocol, or if I got a question that was asked of me, I'll answer it. And that's an ongoing webinar every Tuesday. I teach live BFR courses pretty much all over the world. You can go to my website, edlecara.com, or DM me on any of those social media handles, and I'll be happy to respond. Or you can just call my clinic, bodyloungeparkcities.com, and give me a call.
And you're doing educational stuff that's on the BFR Tuesday and your webinars as well. Are those sign up websites for those? And if so, is it under your website at lecara.com?
That's a great point. I really should have it on there. It's if you go on my social media, you'll see it because I'll announce that I'm doing whatever a topic is. I try to be organized on it. I will put a link on my website. My website's getting redone right now, and so I'll put a link on there for BFR Tuesday. I have a whole BFR. It's called a BFR Masterclass. It's my online BFR course, and underneath there, I'll put a link to my BFR Tuesdays.
Gotcha. Is there anything you want to selfishly promote? Because guys, Ed is an amazing resource. Everything he's talking about is pretty much gold. Any way you can hear more about you, Ed? Are you working on any projects, anything that you'd be wanting others to get into or listen to that you're working on, that you see working on in the future, or anything you just want to share?
I'm always looking at, teaching, more courses. I love teaching. I love, doing live courses. So I currently teach the BFR course. I teach the instrument assisted course, the programming. I teach a cupping, movement assessment, and flossing course. So any of those things you can see on my website of where I'm going to be next. Um, we're doing some cool research on recovery with a pretty well known brand, which I hope I'll be able to announce at some point. It looks like BFR might increase oxygenation in muscle tissue, even with the cuffs on. So it looks like from preliminary studies that the body adapts to the hypoxic environment and might increase oxygenation while the cuffs are on. I'll know more about that soon, but that's pretty exciting. I'll release that when I can. Other than that, if I can help anybody out or help a friend that's in Dallas that wants to see me while I'm here, I practice from 7 a.m. almost till 7 p.m. every night. And I'm also happy to consult either via Skype or via phone.
Gotcha. And it's smarttoolsusa.com, correct, for the BFR cuffs?
Yeah, you can either go to you can go to my site, or you can connect with me if you want to get it. I can get you. We could probably do a promotional discount if you want to get some cuffs. But smarttoolsplus.com is the mothership, where we're out of Cleveland, Ohio, where we're promoting both our live courses and our material and our cuffs.
I can vouch for them firsthand. They're awesome. You guys do amazing work, and the information you guys put out is really killer. I mean, the amount of stuff I've been able to learn from you guys and what you've been doing has helped me a ton. It's really, really awesome to see you guys promoting the education that way. Ed, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. It was a blast talking to you. Again, guys, go follow him on Instagram. He's got some amazing stuff. Any way you can read about him, learn about him, and what he's doing, please do so. Ed, thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I love spreading the word and talking to like-minded individuals and making friends, that have kind of this ongoing theme of, it's all about, there's two things that we can control in our life. It's really what we put in our mouth and how much we move. And people like you that are getting the word out, this information is really important, that we've got to take control of our health. We're the only ones responsible. So let's do it. And then if there's other people that can help you, like, reach out to them and get the help you need.
No, that's great. All right, guys. Thank you for listening. Really appreciate it. And Ed, thank you once again.